This
So,
conference will now be recorded.
so this small eyes is basically a focused approach, and you can see the two big ears. These big ears signifies listen more. So there's a shlok in Yajurveda that is called Anubhadrai Kritva Yantu Vishwata. That means there's always knowledge flowing. If you keep your ears open, you'll get those. And with this big ears, you can see small mouth beneath this trunk. That means speak less, because typically when you're talking, you're not listening. You may be hearing, but you are not listening. So God has given you a very great proportion, 2 ears, one mouth. Means listen double the amount what you speak. And that's the going to be a path to gain knowledge. Then you can see big trunk. What does that signifies? It signifies your strong sense for business. So you are dealing in any formal and informal setup. You come across a lot of things. Have that strong sense develop so that you can sense business and create some more opportunity for yourself, for your organization, or for whatsoever segment you're working for. And this trunk you can see in a small, little bit tilt form. This signifies that nothing which is coming to you is going to be very simple. It will create a lot of complexities, difficulties, and don't scared of those, because the more complex problem you handle, you are going to make yourself more robust in the process. Because if small thing comes on your way and you get rid of those things, anybody can do that. But major learning comes where it challenges your intellect. So all these complexity are meant to shape up your career, shape up your personality, add value to your personality. Then there are two tasks. You can see one is in full form and one is bit broken. So this task which is full, it signifies the value for communication and presentation skill set what you need in a business world. So whatever good idea or excellent idea you have, if you do not have a right communication and presentation skills to sell those things, you'll not make a big, say, impact on anyone. So while you are technically qualified, you are very minute level of detailing for everything, but how you create interest of other party, that behavioral approach is equally important in the real world. So work on that skill set. Then the second task, which is a broken, that signifies the value of sacrifice. Many times you have to sacrifice your small goals to achieve something bigger. So if you relate it to the real world, you might come across some tempting stuff in the beginning of your career, which probably might not be in line with your real objective. So try to see that you do not get tempted for such things which is not in line with your goals of the life or your destination. So sacrifice smaller things to achieve something bigger in life, which is your focus area. Then there are two hands. One is having some sweet, and the other is in a posture of giving blessing. So this the hand which is giving blessing is when you reach to a level of manager where people work for you, you might not get everyone to a level of similar competency. So cultivate a habit of supporting those who are, say, not up to the mark, and they are looking for your hand holding to reach to your level of satisfaction or be at par with, because there are always somebody is fast learner, somebody is a slow learner, but that does not relate to their competency is less or high. So be when you become manager, support people to grow, to get motivated, to enhance their efficiency, etc. Whereas the sweet, on the other hand, that signifies reward people who work for you for their good things. Many times in the real world, we get lost. We do remember if somebody has not done well, we do remember to criticize the person or do some negative aspect, but we rarely go out of the way to greet person or reward somebody taken for granted. Oh, this is his job or this is her job. I think greeting people is equally important, and it actually gives you much better energy level than criticizing people. And henceforth, as a manager, make sure you appreciate people double the amount you criticize. Then there's this big belly. This belly signifies appetite for confidential information. So when you land up into the business, you may get exposed to a lot of confidential information. You may sometimes feel like sharing with your colleagues or some classmates, etc., who are working for some other competitor, etc., because you have been a school buddy or college buddy, etc. But I think in a business, we have to very differentiate this friendship and the real aspects. And many times you'll never know with what intention you shared something, but it damages the company's goodwill or some kind of business proposition, etc., etc. So it's very important when you grow to a level of senior executive, you show your competency towards keeping confidential information confidential. Otherwise, it will become a kind of a gap in your personality. It may obstruct your growth in the organization. Then there are two legs, which signifies as a manager, you have to stand with for your firm commitment. You should not work as a postmaster. Somebody has said something, you have passed on that. When you say something, take ownership of that statement, because people will remember what you said to them, how, etc., etc., they might not remember. And if people perceive you, oh, this guy says that they will deliver, but it doesn't come, etc., over a period of time, you'll realize nobody takes you seriously, because there is no commitment aspect they could see in your statements. So make sure when you land up into the corporate world, from the day one, people will measure more for your behavioral skill set, less for your academic stuff. And academic would go into some kind of a knowledge base or some kind of other aspect which will help you to do your job. But as for the people, memory they will remember more, or they will incline to work with you more because of your behavioral traits. Then there's a small feet holding such a huge body. This signifies your value system. You may be best of the brain, you may be highly talented, you may be rank holder all through your life, but your value system, if it is not in place, what is value system? Your ethics, integrity, safety, people care. If this value system is not in place, anytime, any moment, things get collapsed. And once it get collapsed, probably nothing will work. So please hold very strongly your value system. There will be a lot of things happening around you which will be deviating you from your value system. But only it's the value system which can sustain you growing confidently and growing unconditionally. You may be a slow grower in the beginning, but if your value system in right place, you will be sustainable. And I think you'll not have any kind of issue. You'll be end of the day having very high amount of peace in your mind. Last but not least, in this picture, you can see a small rat, and there's a mythological story attached to this. And that mythological story is that Shiva and Parvati had a pot of nectar, and they wanted to give this pot of nectar to one of their son, Ganesh and Karthikeyan. So they put one small competition. They said whoever takes the say round of the universe faster, he'll be getting this pot of nectar. So Karthikeyan has that peacock and Ganesha has that rat. So Karthikeyan immediately sat on the peacock and started flying across the universe. Ganesha just pulled himself back, thought of Vedas he learned, and in Vedas he remembered that he recalled that there's no one bigger than your parents. So he just sat on the rat and take a round of the parents and claimed for the pot of nectar. This, if I relate to the corporate world, shows I'm not saying the hard work is not important, but smart work is very key for your success. So all these behavioral traits we talk through this Ganesha picture is going to be much more important than what we are going to talk in the rest of the slides. So hope you can maintain some of these traits in your personality, and I wish you all the best and success in your corporate career whenever you complete your course and come into the real world. So just in case somebody has any question, query, they can stop me and ask for something more. Otherwise, I'll just move on. Is that fine?
Fine.
Sure. So are you guys okay if I give you one or two more stories? Because I think stories retains in the mind much longer period than any other stuff.
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay, so let me. I think you guys have seen this picture, Three Idiots. Hopefully, all of you have seen this. So we are going to talk about Four Idiots now, and let me frame these Four Idiots in context to Akbar and Birbal. And so far, we have just through Ganesha picture, we heard about that. What are the basic traits one has to have as a good manager? So this Four Idiots, once what happened, the Akbar asked the Birbal, go and find four idiots for me, and then prove how they are. How do you call them idiots? So Birbal said, okay, sir, I'll go and find idiot, but it requires around 10-15 days for me. Akbar said, okay. And when you come back to the court, just bring those four idiots along with you. So after a week, 10 days, Birbal comes back with two guys. And first Akbar sees that, oh, this guy, I asked him to come with four idiots and he's coming only with two. Let me ask him whether he's ready with four guys or not. So Akbar asked the Birbal, are you ready with your four idiots? Birbal said, yes, I'm ready. So Akbar said, okay, bring them one by one. So Birbal brings one guy and he says, sir, this is the idiot number one, because I saw him, he was traveling in a bullock cart and carrying some load on his head. So for me, he's an idiot. Why should he carry the load on his head when he's sitting in the cart? Now the twist here is, we get so many such idiots in the corporate world. And those are those guys who don't want to delegate. They don't have enough time to complete the work, but still they don't delegate, because for them, if they delegate the work, they would be preparing somebody as their competitor, and they don't want to delegate. So maybe when you land up into the corporate world, you might find such kind of idiots. Just ignore them and see that how best you can create your own value proposition. Because when we land into the business or corporate world, we have a high amount of willpower. We wanted to deliver something, do something, show something, show some competency. But at the same time, in the real world, we face these kind of idiots also. So take care of those guys, manage those guys smartly. Okay, then Akbar said, who is the second one? Birbal brings another guy and he says, this guy was beating his cow and pushing his cow to climb on the ladder to eat a grass which was there on the rooftop. And so this guy is an idiot for me, because rather than bringing the grass down and making this cow eat that grass, he was rather beating his cow. And probably we get such kind of idiots as well in the corporate world, when they don't compare the infrastructure and various other facilities, etc., but they do compare the result of a larger global corporation along with their company. So and so guy has achieved something, you are not achieving this. So just ignore those kind of managers. Be realistic, because when you are realistic, you will deliver something which is expected and which can be possible. If you are not realistic, it will not add value to your personality. So that was the second idiot. Then the Akbar said, who is the third one? So we will, with a smile on his face, said, "Sir, I'm the third idiot. I'm your courtier. I have so many important jobs to do, but you asked me to go and find fools, and I've just gone to find idiots for you." So I think I'm also one of the idiot, because rather than justifying the importance of the activities, I just followed you. And in the real corporate world, you get so many such kind of idiots. They do not question, they just want to work as a yes sir, yes ma'am. And actually all those values for which they landed into the business world, they forget all those values. Rather just wanted to be more pleasing to somebody for a shortcut success. Don't be one of such idiot, because as I said, the more number of challenges you face, more robust career progression you will be making for yourself. Obviously, you all know now who's the fourth idiot, but still Akbar asked Birbal who's the fourth idiot, and Birbal said, "Sir, you have so many other important jobs to do, but you're still asking me to go and find 4 idiots for you. And you might get such idiots as well in the corporate world. Some CXO, CEO, or senior people, they will just engage you for some mundane activities, whether it makes value for the organization or not, but just to show. And probably you don't have to get into such trap of following those guys. Make your smart moves, and if you can change the scenario, fine, but otherwise make sure that what you are doing is adding value to the organization, because otherwise the organization won't grow and things will fall flat, and you will be also one of the victim of that. Make sense? So the Ganesha story and the 4 idiots are though two different contexts in the real world, and one you have to cultivate within your personality, and second you have to avoid if you get into similar kind of situations. So hope it makes sense for all of you guys, and this is the real time experience you are going to face yourself when landing into the business. So coming back to my topic for today's webinar and discussion is the supplier matters, and this supplier matter is, if you can see this slide, there's a R word in a broken piece. So this because most of the business in some kind of a thinking that is supply matter for them, not the supplier, but actually it's the other way. They focus so much on the supply, they forget the supplier, who is responsible for ensuring that their business sustains and they are able to meet all your requirements, etc. So if I see this statement that there's always a sense of firefighting, raw material must reach the plant on time, but there should not be excess inventory, buy just in time basis, input must be at the lowest cost, vendor must be loyal, even if the payments are delayed, even the market is volatile, even the forecast accuracy is not. So this is actually a KRA KPI of any procurement and a supply chain guy. And in today's highly competitive global marketplace, the pressure on organization is to find new ways to create and deliver value to the organization. And in such scenario, when you are, say, having these kind of pressures or these kind of expectation, it is the quality of thinking and simplicity of your simplicity of application aspect which can gives you an edge to stay ahead in the procurement world. So we will be talking more about the supplier and supply, but a prima facie, if your supplier is not in shape, none of your supply will be in the order you desire. And that's something we'll touch base again a couple of times in various other slides. And maybe you can just note down your questions, etc., which we may take after the presentation. So moving to the next. In a procurement world, too often in the past, supplier was selected primarily on the basis of cost, which eventually proves costly. Today, when market is characterized by globalization, increasing customers' value, expectation, expanding regulatory compliances, global economic crisis, intense competitive pressures, supplier selection, evaluation, and relationship management, etc., are such a significant roles and key function, it is not justified to conclude only on the price. So if I elaborate this further, in this iceberg, price is only one segment which is visible to you. If you only focus on the price, you might get trapped, whereas the actual cost iceberg is much bigger. Your transportation, high inventory, lead time, quality related stuff, process time, outsourcing, sustainability, unnecessary movement, etc. All these things has to be considered to reach to a total cost of ownership. So price is just one element of total cost of ownership, which we also call TCO. And henceforth, people who are jumping just because of the lowest price probably might not be making a right sustainable business decision. And here it comes that when we are picking up your supply or a supplier, having exposure to all these elements would always help you to choose or select a right supplier. And if you go back in our history, you might have all gone through and heard about this, that in 2006 there was some problem with the Sony batteries, and almost 10 million laptop was recalled. Almost all the brands were there. Probably Sony doesn't make their own batteries; they outsource, and some assembly or some chip or something, some part of that battery went wrong, and it has created a huge, say, losses and goodwill damage for the Sony. Similar thing you might have seen in 2008 when there was a global meltdown, a lot of companies went into bankruptcy and all those things. Same way in some of the African and Asian countries, because of the child labor, etc., there was consignment was sent back. Similar thing happened with Toyota due to fault in their braking system. 8 million cars were called for replacement of those uh, braking system, which was having some kind of a design problem. So all these things actually costed much more bigger amount than the little bit of additional cost if it would have taken care in the beginning. This all scenario justifies the significance of right source. So I would say if you pick up your right source, you probably can avoid many such issues, short term and long term, and make your business much more sustainable and profitable. End of the day, all these sources, if you look at a typical Pareto of or pie chart of any organization, 60% goes into the cost, raw material, and all those stuff. Say around 20% in the sales and marketing expenditure and 20% in the operation related expenditure. So when you are not picking up your partner or right source, you are putting your 60% money at a high risk, and no business can afford that. So that's the message here, that why your supply chain is critical and why your selection of right supplier is very integral part of your robust supply chain mechanism. So maybe I'll just hear some voices from you guys. Out of this, if these are the 4 suppliers for you, can you guys just help me to know which one you will choose? Anybody can just unmute and tell me something if somebody has any choice.
The one standing on the books.
Sorry? Yeah.
So could you
Which,
standing on the books as well as standing on the money?
Absolutely. See, there are a couple of reasons for this. One reason, the guy who's standing on the money and the book has a maximum visibility of the outside scenario compared to any other guy. Number one. Number two, this is the guy who's optimizing the use of the knowledge and the finances. And henceforth, when we have to pick up a supplier, when we have 4 choices in the real world, pick up somebody who has both knowledge as well as a finance support. What happens in the real world? We go and many times pick up somebody who is standing on the money because he's the guy who is financing everything for you. And you feel like, oh, that becomes the ideal benchmark, and now I'll use that benchmark for others. And that's exactly was the statement, that not always the lowest cost is the right cost. Because you have to see the sustainability, innovations, R&D, and all those stuff, which can only come when your supplier has a right balance of knowledge and finances. The person one who has neither the money nor the knowledge, he'll be totally banking on you. You give them the money to set up the machine, you give them money to buy the raw material, you share the knowledge for the processing, etc., etc. Unlike the other guy who has a lot of money, but you have to teach him all the engineering, technology, everything. And the third guy who has only knowledge, he have to finance this business. And probably as a supplier, I would not choose these 3 guys, rather go for somebody who has a balance of both. Now, this is something I would say, let's how the time has changed. When sometime maybe 88, I started my career, we were into this old paradigm where risk management was the focus area. But now you guys have, along with the risk, you have to also manage the complexity. And that complexity management, along with the risk management, requires a lot of new skills in today's world, which changes every after 3 years. So one has to continue to sharpen their skill set to manage these risks and the complexity in the business, which we'll pick up in some of the few next slides. And if you see that how the economy and how the business scenario is changing, what we need to take into account when we are picking up our suppliers, etc. So corporate social responsibility, innovation, people, economy, demographics are changing. More and more countries are coming into the developing economies and creating a competition. There are very high awareness about the corporate social responsibilities, innovations. So when we work in such a changing dynamics, we need to pick up all these things to ensure that we are ahead of the competition. Maybe in 70s, Japan was leading the show. Thereafter, it became a Germany, China, US. Maybe there will be time for India as well. So things are changing. We have to cope up with those changing needs. And end of the day, is the people and innovation is actually driving the economies. And if we put our focus and say other investment into these areas, probably we can keep our growth engine growing. And if I further, let's say, add some kind of a scenario on this, sometime in 1988, I started my career with the company Sony. And as Malvika shared that I worked for a couple of companies. Started with Sony, Japanese company. In 88, I was literally taught or trained on just-in-time concept. Maybe a few years, I learned the Japanese way of doing business and the culture, etc. Sometime in 1995, I moved to PepsiCo, and it was a US company. They believe in the lowest cost, e-auctions, etc. So I have to leave a lot of concept of just in time and pick up things about the outsourcing and offshoring in terms of bringing down the cost, etc. So again, it was a de-learning and relearning of something new. By the time we ended up in 2000, I was working for GlaxoSmithKline, and they tried to focus more on it's a global company, everything has to be in the virtual world, use more of IT, get rid of those manual processes, etc., etc. So again, something new to learn and apply in a day-to-day job. By the time in 2010, I was working for DuPont and responsible for Asia Pacific region. So there were various kind of a risk, etc. So IT is there, offshoring is there. Now it has a different kind of risk. As I still remember, we used to have one supplier for critical molecule based out of Israel. And that country was almost 9 months in a year, was almost fighting with some of the Arab countries. And it was so complex molecule that we were not able to develop any second source for that. And henceforth, we were keeping almost 1 year inventory all the time. Because it took us 3-4 years to develop a second source. That chemistry was so complex. The people were not having enough good technology to not only develop the chemistry, but also handle the safety aspect related with that chemistry, because it was some kind of explosive chemical. So again, the game for the procurement and supply chain has changed. Manage your risk, reduce your risk, manage the complexity. And by the time today, we are talking about 2020, we are talking about artificial intelligence, digitization, blockchain, machine learning, IoT, and that is changing the basic parameters of the game. So if you think that you have completed your MBA, now for rest of the life you don't have to study, you don't have to learn something new, you have to just continue what you have learned. That's not the reality. The reality is maybe at my time it was changing after 5 or 10 years. Maybe by the time you land into the market, it will be changing every after 2 or 3 years. So that change is the constant, and we have to pick up new and new things, apply in our day-to-day work, and see that the value proposition is created. This is another story, and maybe I hope you like this story. The story goes that there was a guy who was expert in walking on the rope. So he put up an ad in the newspaper that he's going to cross Niagara Fall by walking on the rope from one side, from Canadian side to the US side. And those who have seen the Niagara Fall is a huge, massive stuff. Means with the voice of the water only, you feel a little bit uncomfortable. And when people read, oh, this guy is going to cross Niagara Fall walking on the rope, everybody got assembled. And at the set time, this guy started from one corner, taken his bar and just started walking on the rope slowly from one corner to another corner. People were very happy. Wow, this, that. Everybody clapped for him. Yeah, this is great. After a week, 10 days, this guy puts up another ad saying that this time he's going to walk on the road walk on the rope from one corner to another corner and blindfolded. People were really surprised. Wow, this guy is he's going to walk on the rope blindfolded. Let's go and see. So half of the US and Canada assembled on both sides just to see this guy that is such a massive thing. He's going to walk on the rope blindfolded, and this guy started from one corner, taken out a black ribbon from his pocket, blindfolded himself, and started walking on the rope from one corner to another corner and completed that successfully. People just applauded, awesome, this, that, and they were very, very pleased by seeing this. After a week, 10 days, he put up another ad in the newspaper that this time he's going to walk on the rope blindfolded and putting somebody on his back. People were very, very surprised. They said, wow, this time whole of Canada and US got assembled. Let's see this guy. He's not even walking, but putting somebody on his back as well. So this guy started from one corner and he took out the ribbon, blindfolded himself, then made an announcement. Anybody from the audience is willing to come and sit on his back? None. Nobody volunteered. And that's exactly happens in the real world of business. You feel that you have contributed and you should be considered for some bigger project, etc., etc. But that's your thing. You might have demonstrated, have your patience. People will only trust you when they feel like trusting you, even if you have demonstrated your competency multiple times. At times, it takes. Everyone has their own belief mechanism. Even if you have demonstrated something again and again, that does not mean people will start trusting you. And that's exactly I'm going to talk in my next slide, which is going to be equally important than your functional skill set. That building credibility requires three things. It requires character, competence, and connectivity. So when we say competence, okay, people know you are competent, but they have a iota of doubt on your character. You're not trustworthy. Probably people you'll not be able to create your credibility in the organization. Same way, you're character-wise very strong, but you lack competence. So you don't have those required skill set for the given job. probably again it will not create your credibility. Even if you are character and you have a competence, but you are not a person who has a capability to influence people and create your connectivity among the network or the business world, probably again it will impact your credibility. This credibility is required to generate your trust. Henceforth, the small common area is the credibility which you are going to achieve correct through your character, competence, and connectivity. The bigger this area, the more the growth you will have in your career. You don't have to answer to anyone, but I think a simple tool is you may rank yourself. Nobody have a better ranking than their own conscience. You rank yourself on 1 to 10 scale for all these three attributes. How do you feel yourself as a competent guy for XYZ role? How vulnerable you are from the character standpoint? How effective you are in creating your connectivity or influencing people to get the larger network? And your answer will tell you where actually you need to improve. So you don't have to answer to anybody. You have to just answer to yourself and identify your gap areas and work on those areas, that how you can increase your credibility related domain to be successful in the real world, because this is going to create a behavioral and work related skill, and both these would be equally important for your success in the corporate world. And there's a small video here. Just see this. After that, we'll talk about it. So guys, this blue jersey is a 4 student from IIM Vishakhapatnam, and this 100 guys are from other places, and that's the skill set we require. We are looking for people in the corporate world. They have a skill set which can exceed expectation, and that's the time when people are looking for innovative, lean organizations to deliver the business result. So this says that number doesn't matter, the skill matters, and that's exactly is the message here. Why corporates are looking for IIM and the best institute to deliver something which is making much more sense. And I'm sure you guys going to be part of it when you come to the real world. Now coming to this comfort and growth zone, everyone want to see themselves in a growth zone, and but at the same time we feel that my comfort should not be sacrificed. That doesn't happen in the real world. When we become ourselves more comfortable in one particular area, that's the time we need to challenge. And when you challenge yourself, you might have to cross through fear zone and learning zone. So if you cross through fear zone, you get into the learning zone, and actually then you get into the growth zone. So if you, in the beginning of the career, as much you challenge yourself, learn new things, you are actually gearing up for the growth. So make your choices whenever it comes to that particular point, that you want to choose between comfort and the growth. Growth will always push you back for some lack of confidence, excuses, etc., or say shaking your comfort. but that would be actually driving you towards the growth. We started with the supplier matters. Let me come back to this, the sourcing. So sourcing is not only the art and science, but it is also have a lot of behavioral and work-related skills requirement. And as we were talking about selection of the right source, drive right source to get the right value. And if you see, when we talk about the right source, we are saying right source is a source which enhances our quality, speed of execution, efficiency, and brings down the cost. And in a procurement world, it is very commonly said that okay, if you're in sales, if you're selling a 100 rupees item and if your contribution margin is 20 rupees, you would be adding with a single additional sale 20 rupees in the corporate, say, profitability, etc. Same way, it's a 20% addition into the profitability. In supply chain procurement, we say the single dollar you will save, that adds 100% to the business profitability. And that's the contribution that or the intellect or the talent we hire into this segments can help in let's say making your company much more competitive. If you recall, maybe 20 years back, there were hardly 400 multinational companies in India. Today, I think more than 40,000. And all these guys want to do a low-cost sourcing from India, low-cost resources, low-cost R&D. So earlier, which was a technology-driven sales, today has become more of a commodity and a competitiveness. As I work for two technology-driven companies like DuPont and Honeywell, I remember there was days that these companies were not believing that they need a skilled sales guy. Oh, why should I? My product sells because there was one person in DuPont who was selling TiO2 worth around within India maybe more than 700-800 crore with one single person, because whoever wants their TiO2 of a great quality, they were approaching DuPont, so they don't need sales guys. But now there are 7-8 TiO2 producer, and henceforth they need the sales skills. And when you need more sales force, you need an equally competitive supply chain and procurement talent. And that becomes an area, because every sales guy want to sell you something, and every purchase guy want to say take out, extract some kind of a value proposition for the organization. So this becomes a kind of a behavioral and technology driven subject matter, which is leveraged for selection of right source and the right value. Typically in an organization, when we talk about selecting a talent, we go into the core competency. And if you see in a procurement and a supply chain, the 66% weightage goes to the top 6 skill set, which is supply management skills, change management, best practices for the function, planning, strategizing, negotiation, cost analysis, and the law of the land. So with this 6 skill set, you actually cover around 60-70% of the competency requirement for the function. And that becomes much of a selection criteria for organization, for which they have their own psychometric tests and various other aspects. Now I'm going a little bit to tell you about some key phrases, in the sense that this I just thought to share with you. I think a year back I published one book called Supplier Matters. And this, just to give you a brief on that, this book is all about supplier selection, supplier qualification, and procurement performance governance. So when we talk about supplier selection, every industry, based on their criteria, priority, etc., we define the criteria for the supplier selection and accordingly identify the right partners. Once we identify the right partners, the next step is to do a comprehensive risk assessment. So there are different tools available, and out of the identified guys, we do a qualification process and maybe shortlist some of those guys, which we feel can be titled as a right source. And once we reach to that level and induct those suppliers as our business partner, the third step comes in the way, which is continuous improvement by ensuring that their procurement performance governance mechanism is so robust that it gives a value addition year on year basis. So this book, Supplier Matters, not only talks about the supplier selection criteria and other things, it also captured a lot of my more than 28, 30 years of experience in different industry, global industry, maybe Japanese culture, US culture, UK conservative culture of SmithKline Beecham when it was not GSK's, was SmithKline Beecham, and then the Indian company like Dabur, etc. And but besides the culture, the fundamentals remain same, that if your supplier is strong, it will going to sail you through any tough period. And now in a COVID-19 situation today, most of the businesses will sustain wherever they have a very good supplier relationship management. If people are not caring for their supplier, probably they are going to face much tough time during this phase when everybody has to re-establish their businesses. And just to amplify the same thing, this is a study conducted by Dixon in 1966. The fundamentals have not changed. If you see, this study also says that quality, delivery, performance, warranties, price, production facility, these 7 criteria are still top one. And this becomes a kind of a key selection criteria for any industry into supply, in a supply market where you have a choices. These are the prime criteria where we still pick up our suppliers. And when I did my own survey for chemical industry, this is the survey I conducted when I was working for Honeywell. And if I just take you back to my profile, before working for any chemical company, I started with electronic company Sony. Then I worked for Dabur, PepsiCo, and GlaxoSmithKline in a FMCG segment, food and pharma segment for some time. Then I joined DuPont, and which is a hardcore chemical company, and followed by DuPont, I worked for Honeywell, which is again in the chemical and technology. So during these two companies, DuPont and Honeywell, my assignment was to develop India as a supply base for their global plants. Let me put it this way: in both, like in DuPont, we started from a zero. We identify chemical companies based on the chemistry. There is around 200 reactions. Based on those permutation combination of reactions, you can make any kind of a molecule. So our idea was to find out the suitable partners in India. And when we go and visit the suppliers, there was I think there was no standard at all. And it was very difficult for me to bring any business of DuPont to India. Then we created some kind of a template and some kind of a parameters how to identify and select suppliers. And over a period of, I think, 3-4 years, from zero to almost $30 million business we generated for DuPont by hand holding suppliers in India. But when I spent my major time in Honeywell, I worked for Honeywell for almost 12 years as their procurement director for high growth region, which has around 18 countries in my portfolio. And the job was almost same to develop this region as a supply base for Honeywell corporate business. And Honeywell corporate business was more into technologies, organic chemicals, inorganic chemicals, and various other polymers, etc. And again, now there was a cultural aspect. You have to develop supplier in India, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Latin America, Middle East, Eastern Europe. And we were looking for work out some template which can be used at par everywhere, and we can select our sources. And then we develop this thing just to ensure that, believe me, in most of the global companies, developing suppliers take more than a year. And we spend too much of a time on developing suppliers so that we don't have to face any surprises. And touch wood, all these efforts paid back. All those guys who have been working, even if I left Honeywell and DuPont, they are still working with those companies and generating. I think in 12 years time, I worked for 12 years almost in Honeywell, where we started from $0 sourcing from India to almost, by the time after 12 years, we are doing almost around $500 million sourcing from India. If I take across my region, it was almost around $800 million. So I was a bit biased for India. So I would say the Make in India, which Modi ji has started in 2014, somewhere I was doing much before. But all these things is going to add value in terms of creating a credibility of the country, credibility of the supplier, credibility of your own functional excellence. And if I summarize this, all these criteria into these top 10 criteria, when any global company, I'm saying more from a chemical perspective because this is what I did, but most of the time this applies across the industry. When they look for a partner, supply chain partner, or business associates, what matters to them is the product quality, on-time delivery, contamination prevention, which again something to do with the say quality or technology related stuff, confidentiality, IP protection, and global cost competitiveness. Not only competitive in India or US, globally it should be sustainable competitiveness, compliance of law and ethical standards, manufacturing technology innovation, company goodwill, market reputation, health, safety, and environmental aspects, and social responsibility, and organization efficiency and response. So if my supplier or supply chain partner is having all these parameters, the relationship is likely to be sustainable, and these all are value drivers. It will drive delivery performance, it will drive or minimize the cost, it will drive flexibility, responsiveness, mitigate risk, help you in a complexity management and sustainability, as well as optimization and efficiency aspects. This is from global standpoint when we are working in a global supply chain scenario. And this is a study conducted by Georgia Institute of Technology, and they identified when we are looking in a global supply base, typically these are the issues we face. Political issue, as I said that in DuPont we had a source in Israel, and henceforth we have to keep one year inventory because you never know when this country goes into the war, and we have a supply problem. There are countries where compromised efficiency is a culture. You have to figure it out. Supply chain safety and security related, unreliability of delivery, unreliability of quality. There was a time that people were not much believing into Chinese quality. So all these disruptions and attributes need to be studied when you're looking into the global supply chain. Government regulation, cultural differences, trade regulation, custom tariff, immature suppliers, complexity of transport and logistics, and poorly developed infrastructure. Today, you go 1,000 kilometers in India and 1,000 kilometers in autobahn, you will see what is the time taken, and that all reflects or impact the business which is coming to India or business we generate for the country. So when we are saying all these things, besides this, there are various other challenges as a supplier or as a company we have to face, and as we say, the survival of the fittest. So as an organization or as a buyer, we also have a lot of limitations, a lot of challenges which we need to tackle, like to be more, say, competent and sustainable. That's kind of a challenges. Could be that price or a budget constraint. We need to sort it out. That low volume requirements, sole source, technically unskilled supplier, poor commitment of supply, inflexible suppliers, not very good in technology side, or time pressure. So these are different other challenges as a supply chain partner, as a supply chain professional, we have to handle. And if we are able to handle these successfully, then only we can sustain. So there are a lot of internal, there are a lot of external factors which keeps you challenging, keeps you sharpening your skill set, whether it's a behavioral or work related, to grow in your function and make your offering much more competitive. Let me show another video.
Scientists placed 4 monkeys in a room with a step ladder upon which there was a bunch of bananas. Whenever a monkey went to climb the ladder, the other monkeys in the room were sprayed with cold water. After a while, each time a monkey went for the bananas, the others would attack it to prevent it from doing so. The monkeys learned to never climb the ladder. But then, one of the monkeys was removed, and a new monkey wearing a raincoat was introduced. Naturally, this monkey went for the bananas, and it was customarily attacked and prevented from doing so by the others. This new monkey learned not to climb the ladder. So when another monkey was substituted in and made the bananas, all the others attacked it, including one in the raincoat, despite the fact that it had never been sprayed with cold water. A third monkey was substituted in, and then a fourth final monkey. And still, whenever a monkey tried to climb the ladder, the others would prevent it from doing so, even though none of them had ever been sprayed with cold water. When asked why this was, one monkey said, "That's just the way it is."
So this is actually a scenario which happens in many organizations. When you land up into the company, many people you will find they're doing something, but they don't know why they're doing it. It has no relevance, but they have been doing from last 10, 15 years. Nobody challenged, and they continue to do that same thing. Probably when we are looking for a talent from the new generation, we are looking for people who have the courage to challenge things, why we are doing. And that's exactly this monkey story says. There is no cold water is spread, but still nobody want to climb because initial culture was waiting, and that's exactly happens in the industry today. We need to change the status quo. We need to challenge. We need to ask questions why we are doing. Logically tell me, rather than assuming that I am the junior most guy. Why should I ask when the seniors are? Right, maybe the seniors are the old monkeys, and they don't know that the things have changed. And that's exactly when we look for a talent. We look for people who has that courage, who have capability and conviction to change the things. And many times these things become much more important than anything else. So coming back to our function related stuff. So this book, Supplier Matters, whenever you get a chance to read this, though this book is available on Kindle, iBook, Google, or through Amazon or Flipkart or some other say e-commerce stuff other than the shops, etc. So there's a chapter in this book which is talking about the international negotiation, and I would say in last 30 years I had a chance to visit to around 26 countries. I'm not talking about any subjective aspect of the negotiation in this particular segment. I'm more talking about the economic condition and the behavioral aspects. And some of the examples I'll share in my next slide, which are equally important to know when you're dealing in a global scenario. Some of the common behaviors become so important that even if you are technically equipped and qualified, small, say, wrong understanding in certain common behavior can jeopardize the entire business deal. And let me share a few of those things in a very crisp way. I'm sure when you read through or whenever you get a chance to read this book, you'll find much more in detail. For example, in the Saudi, it's like your punctuality is a respect. For example, that let's suppose you have a meeting with your Saudi client at 10 o'clock, and because of XYZ reason, you reach by 10:15, maybe around 15 minutes late. And if the guy is already there, probably they will consider that as their insult. You might not know why the deal did not happen. You're very competitive, your product is good, but this guy has considered that as an insult. Whereas on the contrary, if you are on time and if the Saudi guy is late, he reaches around 10:15 or 10:30, he will connect this with his, say, uh, his personality. He will take he'll take this as his elevation. That he's so important that he has to make you wait for him. So these cultural aspects many times become so important that the actual things goes on the back burner. Same way in the France, rushing is vulgar, considered as close as vulgar, and getting back. If France are so sophisticated, they're so prepared for any discussion, business negotiation, etc. You say, "Oh, I have to catch my flight in 5. Can we close this deal by 5 o'clock?" Okay, you go and catch your flight if you have no time for the business. So that's considered as abuse there. Or if you're not prepared, okay, I'll come back to you. Probably they feel as a waste of time. Russia, graft is a common as taxation. I think it's a very known fact in many countries. And Turkey, they will never refuse. So if you are in Turkey and if there's the highest level of respect, if somebody invites you to have food at their home, and if you decline that invitation, it would be not less than abuse. First of all, they not reach to that level in their interpersonal relationship, but if it reaches to that level, and if you refuse that invitation, it would hamper you huge way in your business dealing. Indonesia, consultation fees is form of getting things done. Japan, person doing most of the talking won't be a decision maker. Normally, Japanese business discussion happens in a team. And believe me, the person who is talking least is actually observing and he's the decision maker. The person who's talking most, he might not be a decision maker. He may be one of the influencer. And you may come out after the discussion, oh, yeah, I had a very good discussion, etc., etc. Everything will land into your favor, but that might not be the case. So These cultural aspects become so important at times for your effective business deal. South Korea, don't be direct, follow diplomacy. Thailand, personal relationship is an important part of India, important part of doing business. Something like Asian culture. In India or in China or in Thailand, many of the Asian culture, personal relationship is more important than any other form for getting into business relationship. Vietnam, time is money, isn't their culture. So they have a lot of time and they're not in a hurry. US, want to play by their own rule. So these are some of the traits of those economy and those things, which is the behavioral aspect, and many times is much more important than typical negotiation related studies like cooperative negotiation, comparative negotiation. All this doesn't matter if we are not able to trace the local culture and the behavioral aspect which drives people. So I'm sure this will be an interesting chapter to read. There are almost around 13, 14 pages on this particular stuff in that book. So coming to how the dynamics are changing in the procurement and supply chain. In 90s, we were talking about the price management. Then we graduated in terms of observing the costs. It became more strategic sourcing. Then the category management. Today, we talk about the value management. So as long as I'm getting the value much more than I'm spending, that becomes a much more competitive option. So the priorities are changing accordingly, the strategies are changing, the tools are changing, and the voice of customer is becoming more and more important. Going to the net, I think next this slide, criticality grid, or I think you might have started this. This is a very simple things, which is very simple but very useful also. And this is the one thing, and from the academic chapter to the real world, it matters, and you use these stuff day on day basis when you identify or categorize your amount of time invest and your supplier relationship management related strategies you put in place depends on the market complexity in the spend. So acquisition, critical, strategic. When their market complexity is high, spend is high, that's the focus area for most of the procurement guys. And accordingly, you form your strategies, you define your way of working, you train your team, etc. So this is a very basic but very much applicable stuff across the industry, and that helps us in developing the right strategy and the right source and kind of a different key aspects for managing your supply chain. I think you all guys are aware about Industry 4.0, and I think procurement is also not very far from matching up those expectations. So in say in a procurement 1.0, we were talking about discount, etc., price, lower price. Now in procurement 2.0, we started managing the things in the category management, defining, strategizing stuff. Procurement 3.0, the focus went into the risk management, complexity management, and now we are living in a procurement 4.0 level where the focus is going into artificial intelligence, blockchain, digital world, virtual mechanism, etc. So with the changing needs of the business, the technology is changing, skill set is changing, and henceforth we also keep on adding new skills in our day-to-day management or day-to-day work-related stuff, and that becomes a kind of a continuous improvement process for all of us across the function, not only in the supply chain, but I think in the different function as well. So there's another clip here. I hope I'm going okay on the time. So
coming on the stage, you could see a spotlight focusing on wherever the spotlight also moves. Like that you may feel, but I tell you, all these are myths. Reality is different from the spotlight syndrome. Take life casually. You need not pressurize yourself, but at the same time, be prepared to face what life throws to you. It is your responsibility to show your value to the world. What is that value? That skill set that you have. So you have to equip yourself with this skill. What do you know extra other than your subject? Because whatever you learn here inside the campus, they serve to be a pizza base. Please remember, the educational qualification is just a pizza base. Have you ever seen anyone enjoying a pizza base alone without a topping? No. What do you have for topping that attracts the society? And that topping is a skill set. Are you good at conversing in different languages? Are you good at handling people who are from very heterogeneous population? Are you good at being, doing the work at the given time? Are you flexible? At the same time, are you firm? Are you confident of yourself? So many skill sets are needed. They call it under one umbrella. You all know the HR skills. So without skill set, as a topping on your pizza base, I think life won't be enticing. Life won't be successful. You have good things in store for you in future. For that, you need to have the courage to face the failure. It is only failures that will make us strong. And those who continuously face success, I tell you, they are weak at heart. They cannot even accept no as an answer. Whereas those who travel through the failures, I tell you, leave them in any corner of the earth, they will get back. Be confident. Each one seated here is a unique personality. You are special creations and you're limited edition. There could be nobody like you in this world. You are the one. You are unique. You are special. You are beautiful in the way you are created, and you are here created for a purpose, to do something to your family, to the institution, and to the society. So be bold to face failures. And every time you fall down, get up. Enjoy life.
So guys,
People are performing.
this is another one which you'll see that how with the help of the talent and now the is going to be for the next generation. Hope you'll enjoy this as well. Just watch when India comes into the picture. So you've seen that India was there in the picture. Now things are going to be in the next generation, how we drive and grow our country, various perspectives. So that was, guys, for me for today. And just sharing that in case you feel that supply chain is going to be a piece of interest or career in the future, probably my book would help you, which is a kind of a experience of my 25, 30 years in different companies on various parameters, behavioral work related skills, which can help you. So now we can take any query or question if you have. Malvika, over to you on this. I'll just open up. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the session. We have a few questions from the audience. Rupal here wants to know, how do you think technology can be leveraged to optimize the supply chain process from a quality control perspective?
Technology is very important piece now for not only for for the quality but for various other aspects. But since your question is only in context of the quality perspective, yeah, there are. If you see, I remember when I was working for Honeywell and certain companies which are technology oriented companies, and I remember when in a town hall, our CEO used to say that, guys, are you going to board in a flight if your pilot says that there are 1% chance that the some component won't work and flight can crash. So probably technology helps us making sure that the 100% things. Now, since I'm working for aviation industry, and in aviation industry also, the risk parameters are so high that we are purely banking on technology to ensure that each and everything from a quality perspective is perfect from a Six Sigma level or Seven Sigma level. So any technology, any engineering piece ensures that our repetitive product is 80% as per the parameters. And I think manual stuff is no more into consideration. The whole world across the industry is banking on technology to ensure that what product they give to the consumer based on their quality uh, commitment or quality related whatever promises they have made. So it is a very integral piece, and I think these days, if you look into any lab, any across the industry, there are various sophisticated equipment in place right at the manufacturing level to ensure that the product is the quality parameter standard. It gets dropped at the production line. It doesn't go even to the next level, and that way companies are now assuring it. So it is now no more a quality control department, it's more of a quality assurance department. And for that, companies are making investment into the technologies. Hope that answers. Does this answer your question?
Sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So another student has a question. They're asking, China being the manufacturing hub has always been a part of at least one of the supply chain for many products. With the recent change in events, will companies jump the bandwagon of preferring localized production for better supply?
I hope yes, because a similar situation happened during the Beijing Olympics time, and believe me, that time I was in the chemical industry. And what happens in China, because to clear their skies within a 4 days time, they close around 20,000 chemical plants in Beijing. And what happened that with the closure of these 20,000 chemical plants, all of a sudden, all the inquiries started floating towards India, because neither the Thailand nor the Vietnam nor the Malaysia or Indonesia was so much equipped in the chemistry segment as like India, because India being a pharma market, there's a lot of R&D hubs in terms of a small chemistry related thing. And that time, the at least the chemical industry realized it's not very wise to put up all their eggs in one basket, and they started looking into India, Latin America, as well as Eastern Europe as a second supplier for their raw materials or their intermediate, etc. So I hope in that time a lot of business moved to India and other countries from China. And in the current situation also, you have already heard that Japanese government had taken a decision to move a lot of businesses to India. Almost around more than $23 billion of investment has went to Vietnam from China. So all these geopolitical or say geobiological kind of issues which is emerging now and creating an uncomfort level, uh, and maybe some geopolitical scenario emerging between China and US, probably countries like Thailand, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia is going to gain all of this. So India has a better chances because we have technocrats, we have a lot of other than some electronic industry, we have a fundamental basis available for chemicals, pharma, automotive, textile, infrastructure, and various other industry where these global companies, whether from Japan, France, UK, Germany, they would look India as their much more sustainable partner compared to putting everything in the China. But over a period of time, the economies of scale may help India and Vietnam and Thailand also to compete on numbers terms with China.
Okay, sir. I hope that has answered the question. There's another question from one of the students. So, what are the measures that companies should take to safeguard the operational viability of the supply chain shock which has been caused by the COVID pandemic?
Well, there are a lot of things going on. First of all, it varies from industry to industry, but I think any robust plan has yet to come because the dynamics are different in a global scenario. And to handle those situations, to be very frank, industrial world is still struggling in terms of how to manage those dynamics and what kind of precautions and what kind of a safety measures so that the business could run on a sustainable and continuous basis. I don't think we as an industry is yet uh, taken a complete or have a visibility of the full root cause so that we can develop a system which can actually safeguard against such kind of a pandemic. And I think in hopefully coming few weeks and months we will see much more system in place and which can help us in handling these kind of biological problems. So far, not much has been done. At least I have not personally come across very, say, robust or known system in place by any company who has successfully developed a mechanism to handle such scenario, to be very frank. So I would be also looking into a real answer to this question, which is still open question for me.
Yes, sir. Right. So we have another question from Namit. So he asked, in the chemical industry specifically, how can Indian companies manage the price change scenario since pharmaceutical companies right now rely on China for their material, and paint manufacturers also rely on China for their titanium dioxide supplies. So how should the chemical industry handle this situation?
Okay, so I think there was a time when everybody was sourcing their intermediates and chemicals or raw materials, etc., from China, and we had no other option but to look into Chinese price plus our processing cost. That scenario is actually changing. Now, many companies in India is going into the backward integration. Let's understand first how the Chinese costing works. In China, if you actually go into the root cause, there's no fixed cost as a cost element. There are only two costs: one variable cost and a variable fixed cost. Probably there is no fixed cost added in the costing because most majority of the company, rather 100% of the company, have some kind of a investment or free flowing money from government, and henceforth they become very competitive. And believe me, the kind of export incentive in China, if they export product worth $100, they get around $117 credit in their account. So the Chinese produced product is expensive in China compared to outside China. With this kind of economics, it is very difficult for any Indian or any other country to compete on a financial term. But now companies are realizing the cascading effect of China dependency on China, and they are looking into the backward integration. Many of the pharma companies which were talking about the efficiency of their product have realized that if they make backward integration, probably not on the absolute cost term, but on a yield and various other efficiency profile, they can make their end product much more competitive on a total landed cost basis. And I have lived that as an example. There was one molecule where pricing in or cost of production in US around $26, cost of production in Germany was around $34 something. China was supplying that product for $9, and that's I think I remember during my DuPont days. Somewhat that chemistry I was able to develop with one WAPI-based chemical producer for $4 just because of innovation in the technology. So it's a so dynamic field that there's no set rules. You have to be innovative and you have to be actually very good in terms of certain chemistry aspect, and there are a lot of things, there are a lot of ways to do the same thing, and probably those aspects, those innovative approach has helped Indian companies, uh, not only in other chemistry, even in the titanium dioxide. There was certain grade of titanium dioxide which was DuPont produced all the paint manufacturer used to buy from them. But some of the company in the last few years, 3-4 years, they are able to successfully develop those grades indigenously. And I think whether it's a technology tie-up or their in-house R&D, etc., but we are gearing up towards that where the interdependence is also leveraged, as well as banking on their own R&D is helping this industry to become say sustainable, rather than banking on earlier the technology is coming from Germany, raw materials coming from China, you are processing things. But I think now companies in India also realize that it is equally fruitful to develop your own technology, develop your own backup raw material, and become more competitive and sustainable. So this scenario is changing very quickly.
Okay. And one last question for the session. Nishtha here wants to know, how will technology like AI and blockchain play a part in handling and changing the way that the supply chain is managed amidst the COVID-19 scenario? And can digitization of the supply chain play a role in bringing back the market to normalcy?
I think yes, it's changing the scenario in a way that earlier, if you see, I think 80s, 90s, if I remember, if you talk about big companies, they have 150 or 200 people in the procurement department or supply chain department for managing, because it was a wireless. When I started my career, we were talking on the long distance call, hotlines, wireless, etc. And it was taking too much of a time. Now, I think with the SAP, with the blockchain, is so integrated, information is available immediately, and even at times that you do not need people to manage. And if I tell you that in Germany, in Honeywell, we had a plant at around 60-70 acre land managed by 40 people. Everything in DCS control, everything is integrated, and all linked with the computers, artificial intelligence, and working perfect, fine in terms of the quality and other things. So I do see a lot of changes. This technologies, this artificial intelligence, blockchain or machine learning is adding into the industry, and hopefully this will continue, and rather will improve in coming time.
Right, right. I think that's answered majorly most of the queries that the students had. Sir, I really thank you for joining us for this webinar session. Our students learned a lot. It was a very insightful session, and we'd like to have more in the future.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time. It's great interacting with you. Thank you. Have a great career and great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.